In 1953, the World Health Organization published a report classifying fermented African foods as a public health risk. In 2019, the Journal of Food Science confirmed those same foods contain probiotic properties that pharmaceutical companies are now trying to replicate. They banned Genius and sold you the replacement. These are 20 of them. And item 20 is the one that explains why every single food on this list was dismissed at the same time by the same people for the same reason. Stay for it. For decades, colonial food authorities called African cooking methods unsanitary, nutritionally inferior, and primitive. They replaced them with processed alternatives and called it progress. Modern food science spent the last 30 years confirming, one by one, that the grandmothers were right. The fermented condiments, the indigenous fats, the preserved grains, the medicinal foods folded into everyday meals. These were not accidents of poverty. They were thousands of years of observation passed from grandmother to daughter without laboratories, without funding, without anyone telling them it was worth studying. Every item on this list was banned or dismissed. Every one has since been confirmed. Make sure to like and subscribe to keep up with more hidden secrets. The smell hit you before you entered the kitchen. Sharp, pungent, unmistakably alive. A small amount dissolved into the pot and the entire soup changed character in minutes, deepening from broth into something that tasted like it had been cooking for days. That was Iru, fermented locust beans, and colonial health authorities in West Africa in the 1950s classified it as an unregulated hygiene risk and recommended replacing it with commercial flavoring alternatives. What they replaced it with was MSG, invented in 1908, producing the same umami depth with none of the nutritional benefit. What they threw out contains Bacillus subtilis strains with documented antimicrobial and probiotic properties. The same organism behind Japanese natto, now sold in Western health food stores for $8 a pack. What colonial health authorities called a hygiene risk, food scientists now call a probiotic condiment that commercial alternatives cannot replicate. Available at African grocery stores. Dissolve a small amount into any soup base at the start of cooking. But that was just the beginning of what they got wrong. The strips hung in the shade, not the sun. That detail alone was the difference between knowledge and guessing. The coriander pressed into every surface, the vinegar washed before the rub, the cut along the grain. Each step had a reason that was never spoken aloud because it never needed to be. When European settlers recorded the khoi and sand preservation method, they dismissed the coriander seed as a flavoring choice with no preservation rationale. They were wrong by two compounds simultaneously. The University of Beira Interior confirmed in 2017 that coriander oil kills 10 of 12 bacterial strains at mild concentration, and the vinegar wash creates a surface pH below 4.6, the threshold below which dangerous pathogens cannot survive. What colonial settlers called a crude flavoring preference, food microbiologists now call a precision two-compound antimicrobial preservation system. Lean beef, apple cider vinegar, salt, freshly ground coriander, hung in ventilated shade for 4 to 14 days. Total cost under $20. The next one will make you look at your pantry differently tonight. The ash came from the same fire that cooked the meal. Nothing was wasted. Layered between the cowpeas and the sealed clay pot, it looked like it was doing nothing. It was doing everything. 3 years of preservation from a byproduct of the cooking fire. Colonial agricultural programs across the Sahel in the 1950s classified this as primitive and unsanitary, recommending replacement with chemical pesticides and imported containers. Wood ash creates a pH of 11 to 13, higher than bleach, at which level weevil eggs cannot hatch, fungal spores cannot germinate, and bacterial growth is severely inhibited. Researchers in Burkina Faso confirmed ash-preserved cowpeas maintained viability for over 3 years versus 6 months without ash. Same containers, same climate, one variable. What colonial programs called primitive researchers now call one of the most effective low-cost grain preservation systems ever documented. And the chemical pesticides that replaced it left residue the ash never did. Store dried beans in sealed containers layered with wood ash from any hardwood fire. Rinses off completely, zero residue, zero taste. And yet the next one is somehow even more remarkable. 3 stages, each doing something the others could not. The fermentation that broke down what made it dangerous. The pressing that removed the moisture. The toasting that finished what fermentation started. Women who had never read a chemistry textbook were running a 3-stage detoxification and preservation process entirely from memory, and colonial food scientists in the early 20th century called it crude, uncontrolled, and dangerous. FAO documentation confirms traditional fermentation and pressing reduces cassava's natural toxin by over 90%, more effectively than most industrial processing methods. Modern food engineers now study the traditional method because it outperforms industrial alternatives in efficiency. What colonial food scientists called crude and dangerous, the FAO now documents as one of the most efficient detoxification and preservation processes in traditional food science. This next one is the one that should make you genuinely angry. The powder dissolved in water with a slight fizz, turning it tangy and slightly sweet. Children drank it without knowing they were receiving 6 times the vitamin C of an orange and twice the calcium of milk from a tree that had been providing both for longer than any country on Earth has existed. Western food aid programs in the 1960s called it a poverty food, a subsistence item consumed only because nothing better was available, and encouraged families to replace it with imported processed alternatives. In 2008, the European Union approved Baobab as a novel food, confirming it contains more antioxidants than any berry tested by the USDA. The poverty food that Western aid programs discouraged is now sold in Western health food stores for $15 a jar, at a price the families who were told to stop eating it cannot afford. What Western food aid programs called a poverty food worth replacing, the European Union now calls a novel superfood worth importing. The injera started 3 days before it was eaten. The fermentation was not a shortcut. It was the entire point. The sourness was what made the iron bioavailable, what made the calcium absorbable, what made it something wheat could not become no matter how long you fermented it. Colonial agricultural programs in Ethiopia in the 1950s called teff a minor, inefficient crop and incentivized farmers to replace it with wheat and maize. Teff contains 7.6 milligrams of iron per 100 grams versus 3.9 milligrams for wheat, 180 milligrams of calcium comparable to milk, and is naturally gluten-free. Frontiers in Nutrition 2025 confirmed teff is now recognized as one of the most nutritionally complete grains on Earth. What colonial agricultural programs told Ethiopian farmers to abandon is now sold at premium prices in the same Western markets that funded its abandonment. The next one was cleared from fields and called a weed. A handful of dried leaves added to the pot in the last few minutes. So routine it barely registered as a decision. 7 times the vitamin C of oranges, 4 times the calcium of milk, 3 times the potassium of bananas per gram of dried leaf, added to soup like seasoning while delivering more concentrated nutrition than most supplements sold today. Colonial agricultural programs in the Sahel classified Moringa as a weed with no cultivated food value and cleared it from fields to make way for cash crops. 299 peer-reviewed studies on Moringa published as of a 2023 systematic review in PubMed. What they cleared from fields as worthless, nutritional science now documents as one of the most nutrient-dense plants ever studied, and charges $30 a bag for what was once free. Add a tablespoon of dried moringa to any soup or stew in the final minutes. Available at African grocery stores. The fermentation happened overnight without supervision, in a clay pot on the kitchen shelf. By morning, it smelled slightly sour in the specific way that signals something beneficial. Women who could not have named a single probiotic strain were producing them consistently for the most vulnerable members of their families. Colonial-era nutrition programs in West Africa replaced this with commercial infant formula, classifying the fermentation step as unnecessary and potentially dangerous. A 2021 study in the Journal of Nutritional Science confirmed fermented maize porridge delivers significantly higher mineral bioavailability than unfermented equivalents. What colonial nutrition programs replaced with commercial infant formula, science now confirms delivered superior mineral bioavailability, and the formula costs money the communities who were told to use it often cannot afford. The next one was condemned by health guidelines written in the same decade a competing product was invented. The deep orange-red went into the pot first, before the onions, before anything. It was not just a cooking medium, it was the base of the flavor, the color of the dish, the carrier of everything that came after. Families who cooked with it were choosing the healthier option and not being told, because Western health authorities in the 1970s and 1980s classified red palm oil as a dangerous saturated fat, in guidelines that coincided with the commercial rise of vegetable seed oils. A 2020 review in Nutrients confirmed red palm oil's carotene and tocopherol content provides active antioxidant protection that industrial seed oils, invented in the same decade the guidelines were written, cannot match. What Western health guidelines spent decades condemning, nutrition research now confirms has an antioxidant profile superior to the seed oils that replaced it. Red palm oil available at African grocery stores use as your primary cooking fat for soups and stews. The seeds went into the bread dough, into the tea, into the honey. Children ate them without knowing they were receiving an anti-inflammatory compound with every meal. Grandmothers did not know the mechanism. They knew the result, and they passed it down through every generation that followed, regardless of what colonial medical authorities called it. What they called it was superstition, folk medicine masquerading as culinary practice. Over 1,000 peer-reviewed studies on thymoquinone, the active compound in African black seed, published since 2000, confirming COX-2 inhibition, comparable to ibuprofen and broad-spectrum antimicrobial properties. What colonial medical authorities called superstition, pharmaceutical companies are now extracting, patenting, and selling back to the communities who were told it was worthless. 10 secrets, 10 cases where the knowledge was dismissed, the replacement was sold, and modern research confirmed the grandmothers were right. But the next 10 are the ones that should make you feel something specific, because these were not just ignored, they were replaced with products that cost money every month. And the people who profited from the replacement are the same people who called the original primitive. The bitterness was the point. Not a flaw to be cooked out, but a signal to be respected. Women who blanched it knew exactly how much to remove and how much to preserve. The balance was the knowledge, and the balance was passed down, not written down. Colonial nutrition programs called the deliberate cultivation of bitter plants unsophisticated, a low-value vegetable consumed only due to lack of alternatives. Vernonia amygdalina contains sesquiterpene lactones with documented antimicrobial, anti-inflammatory, and anti-malarial properties. A 2011 study confirmed bitter leaf extract inhibits a broad spectrum of pathogenic bacteria. What colonial nutritionists called unsophisticated, pharmacological researchers now call a source of bioactive compounds they are actively developing into pharmaceutical leads. Fresh or dried bitter leaf available at African grocery stores. The bitterness reduces with blanching. The bioactive compounds remain. It was left in the calabash or the clay pot, and it did its own work overnight. By morning, it had thickened and soured in the specific way that meant it was ready, not the way that meant it had gone wrong. Women knew the difference because they had always known the difference. Colonial health authorities called it spoiled milk, a hygiene risk from uncontrolled bacterial contamination, and recommended replacement with pasteurized commercial alternatives. Research confirms African fermented dairy products, including Amasi, contain probiotic strains developed through completely natural processes that commercial yogurt replicates artificially at premium price. What colonial health authorities called spoiled milk, the probiotic industry now sells back at premium prices under different names and different containers. Amasi available at African grocery stores in Southern African communities. No at West African markets. The paste went in after the tomatoes, before the water. Thick, dispersing slowly into the pot and thickening everything around it. Protein and fat in one ingredient, seasoning and substance simultaneously. A single component doing what Western nutrition said required multiple expensive alternatives because early 20th century Western nutrition programs classified groundnut paste as nutritionally incomplete and promoted animal protein as the only adequate source. Groundnuts contain 25 to 30% protein by weight, with a monounsaturated fat profile identical to olive oil, and a 2019 review in Nutrients confirmed groundnut consumption is associated with reduced cardiovascular disease risk. What Colonial Nutrition called incomplete plant protein, cardiovascular research now confirms reduces heart disease risk, with a fat profile matching the olive oil that Western nutrition simultaneously celebrated. The pot held heat differently from metal, more evenly, more slowly, with a quality that changed what happened inside it. Dishes that took an hour in aluminium took longer in clay and tasted like they had taken days. The difference was not imagination. It was physics that nobody had named yet. Colonial modernization programs called clay pot cooking primitive equipment to be superseded and promoted aluminium and enamelware as superior technology. A 2018 study in the Journal of Food Quality confirmed clay pot cooking retains significantly higher levels of heat-sensitive nutrients, including B vitamins compared to metal cookware, because of lower, more even heat distribution. What colonial programs called primitive equipment, food quality research now confirms delivers superior nutrient retention and natural antimicrobial properties that aluminium cannot replicate. Clay pots available at African grocery stores and online. The leaf wrapping was not packaging. It was part of the process. The specific leaves regulated humidity during fermentation in ways no synthetic container could replicate. Women who wrapped Ugba the same way their mothers did were running a precision fermentation process from inherited knowledge, and colonial food safety authorities called it an unregulated hygiene risk, citing the pungent smell as evidence of dangerous bacterial activity. The fermentation is driven by Bacillus subtilis, the same organism behind Japanese natto, now sold in Western health food stores for $8 a pack. What colonial food safety authorities called a hygiene risk, food ethnopharmacology now confirms has documented antimicrobial properties, and the Japanese version of the same fermentation sells for $8 a pack in the same markets that dismissed the African original. The grain cooked in 5 minutes and tasted like it had been grown for the specific conditions it came from, because it had. 5,000 years of cultivation in poor Sahelian soil produced something adapted to those conditions, in ways imported wheat and rice, grown in entirely different climates, never could be. Colonial agricultural programs called Fonio an inferior grain and directed subsidies toward wheat and rice imports that undermined its cultivation. Fonio contains methionine and cysteine, amino acids absent from most major cereals, including wheat, rice, and corn. What colonial agricultural programs called inferior, nutritional science now confirms contains amino acids its replacements lack entirely, and sells as a premium health food in the same markets that funded its abandonment. Fonio available at African grocery stores, cooks in 5 minutes. A small piece flavored an entire pot. That was the measure of how much was concentrated inside it. The smoking was not just preservation, it was intensification. What had been mild became something that could anchor an entire meal from a piece no larger than a palm. Colonial food safety programs classified traditional smoked fish as nutritionally degraded and hygienically inferior to commercially canned alternatives. A 2016 study in food chemistry confirmed traditional African smoked fish contains antioxidant compounds from the smoking process that actually improve the nutritional profile. The canned alternatives add salt, preservatives, and carry tin leaching. What Colonial food safety programs called nutritionally degraded, food chemistry confirms is more nutritionally complete than the alternative that replaced it. The fermented version tasted different from the fresh powder, deeper, more complex, as if something had happened beyond simple preservation. Something had. Colonial health authorities warned specifically against this, classifying the fermentation of Baobab fruit as producing dangerous, uncontrolled bacterial activity. Research confirms that consuming fermented Baobab reduces the activity of alpha amylase, an enzyme implicated in blood sugar regulation, and enhances protein and fiber content beyond the already exceptional fresh profile. What Colonial health authorities called dangerous fermentation, blood sugar research now identifies as a natural process that produces measurable glycemic benefits. It went into the sick person's soup without announcement, not as medicine, as food. The distinction mattered to Colonial medical authorities in ways it never mattered to grandmothers who had watched it work for generations and kept doing it regardless of what they were told, which was that it was superstition displacing proper medical treatment. A 2018 study in the African Journal of Biotechnology confirmed Dawa extract shows significant antimicrobial activity against Staphylococcus aureus and E. coli, the same pathogens pharmaceutical antimicrobials target, delivered at the price of a soup ingredient. What Colonial medical authorities called superstition, biotechnology research now confirms delivers documented antimicrobial activity at every meal. 19 secrets. 19 cases where the knowledge was dismissed, the replacement was sold, and modern research confirmed the grandmothers were right. The 20th is the one that connects all of them. The one that explains why every item on this list was dismissed at the same time, by the same people, for the same reason. Every item on this list was dismissed in the same decade, by the same colonial authorities, operating under the same agricultural development framework. Not because the methods did not work. The research confirms they did. Not because they were unsafe. The research confirms they were safer than the replacements. A 2022 review in food security documented that colonial agricultural policies across sub-Saharan Africa systematically replaced indigenous food systems with monoculture cash crop farming and imported processed foods. The dismissal was not random. It was policy, and the reason every one of them was replaced at the same time is the same reason the men in the Michigan pine country were never told about fat. Not conspiracy. Economics. There is no dollar in people knowing what they already have. There is considerable money in selling them a replacement for something they were told to throw away. The traditional African food system fed the most genetically diverse population on Earth for tens of thousands of years before anyone had a laboratory to study it. The system was not replaced because it failed. It was replaced because it was free. Frontiers in Nutrition 2025 confirmed that traditional African diets deliver high nutritional value, and that the shift toward westernized diets has driven increased rates of obesity and non-communicable diseases in African communities. What colonial policy called a primitive food system worth replacing, nutritional science now documents as a sophisticated system that delivered superior health outcomes. And the replacement is driving the chronic diseases the communities that abandoned it now suffer from. The food your grandmother cooked was not primitive. It was not superstition. It was not the result of having no other options. It was the result of tens of thousands of years of observation passed from grandmother to daughter, without laboratories, without funding, without anyone telling them it was worth studying. And when someone finally studied it, they found what African grandmothers already knew. The knowledge did not disappear. It was buried. And the people it belongs to were never told why. You know now. And now you know why they did not want you to. Which of these secrets did your grandmother practice? Drop it in the comments. I read every one. And if you want to be here when we go through 20 more, subscribe. 3 videos every week. Every one of them is something African grandmothers knew that the modern world is only now catching up to.